Welcome to the 2021 edition of St. Mary's Chester Talks About Race. Last year, we began during a season of COVID, and many churches struggling to find ways to remain connected to their congregation and to others simply seeking faith after quarantining or perhaps the loss of a loved one. And while COVID-19 separated us from one another, it did not separate us from systemic racism and its practice of dehumanizing people of color. The deadly dehumanization of George Floyd and countless others is historically supported by systemic racism and its subjective use of the definition of what it means to be human. From the founding of this nation and others whose citizens are of African descent, people of color have been deemed less than human. Today, we present to you the Papal Bulls and its historical construction of dehumanizing people of color solely for the purpose of exploitation and profit.
Let's go into the 15th century now. So the 1400s, right? You got the Portuguese trading with Africa, okay? And sometimes they're taking Africans by force. And then in 1455, you get the Pope Nicholas V. He issues a papal bull and he says this. Now, bear in mind, back then, this is the biggest Christian leader in the Western world. Okay? And this is what he said. He said, we granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso. So he's saying what permission he's given King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wherever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods, whatsoever held and possessed by them, and, check it out, to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Okay? Bit later he says, thence also many Guineamen and other Negroes taken by, and by the way, I just want to be clear, throughout this session, when you hear me use the word Negro, if I use it, I'm using it as the reported speech of what other people have said or thought. Okay, I just want to be very clear. If you doze off at any point and come back and hear me use that word, understand I'm saying this is what the person I'm talking about was saying or arguing. So he says, Guineamen and other Negroes taken by force and some by barter of unprohibited articles or by other lawful contract of purchase have been sent to the said kingdoms. A large number of these have been converted to the Catholic faith, and it is hoped, by the help of divine mercy, that if such progress be continued with them, either those peoples will be converted to the faith, or at least the souls of many of them will be gained for Christ. So right here, notice, first off, the concept of seeking out slaves. The religious leader of the day is telling people they can seek out slaves. It's very different to the Old Testament law when it's dealing with slavery. It's dealing with the reality that sometimes in war, you end up with you're either going to kill the people on the other side or you're going to make them your slaves. It's very different with the Old Testament law dealing with the concept of if you're really poor, you could go to someone and say, look, I'll work for you as a slave for 7 years and then release me. Very different concept. This is actually seeking out slaves, and it's coming from the church, the concept. I'm not saying they're the first people. There were always kidnappers for a long time, man stealers. But the leader of the church is sanctioning it from the church. Bear in mind, he's saying this even though 1 Timothy 1:10 gives a condemnation to slave traders in the New Testament. But notice as well the concept of perpetual slavery, the idea here that you can actually reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, to a slavery that goes on and on and on without an end. Notice also that the Pope talks about the benefits of conversion as if slavery is a good thing. Like, you can go stealing people, and you know what? We've already seen some people have become Christians from it. So this is a good thing. This is a pretty terrible justification of slavery. So you've got an image bearer here who is not using their power to serve and protect, but they're using their power and they're using their voice to actually hurt image bearers. So it's dehumanizing other image bearers, but the Pope is himself dehumanizing himself in the process by not acting as an image bearer should. Now, a bit later than this, in 1492, you got Columbus. He goes to the Caribbean. Columbus is an Italian explorer. In his log entry about the Caribbean inhabitants, he says, they were well built with good bodies. Now, if you remember what we've seen from people like Thomas Aquinas and others, if you hear someone talk about someone being well built with good bodies, you're going to be a bit like, uh-oh, because in some people's minds, that means maybe you were made to be a slave. You know, by the way, I'm not saying Thomas Aquinas would totally say that if he was here, you know, but he did say there are some people with a strong body seem to be naturally fitted for service. And Columbus says they're well built with good bodies and handsome features. He says they do not bear arms. Okay, and that's key, because this is how so much colonization and enslavement happened. It happened from European powers having weaponry that was sophisticated. But what's interesting is you hear people keep referring to their intelligence. It's their intelligence that shows why they should make slaves, because they are superior, not bringing up the fact that actually it was their weaponry. Now, some people might say, yes, but their weaponry, is that just from their intelligence? We've got to bear in mind, not all the European intelligence comes from Europe, right? So the idea of these big boats, you know, that were used to travel down to Africa and used to transport slaves, those ships, that concept of big ships, the design of them, the technology came from the Muslim world. It didn't come from the European world. Anyway, he then says they would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. So notice the concept in Columbus's mind that these people's physique makes them suited for slavery. I think that's what he's getting at. He certainly thinks they're suited for slavery. And notice that he thinks they can just go and subjugate them. It's just a matter of whether they can or not, which he's saying they can if they got enough men. And so it's not recognizing, as image bearers, we've been authorized to use our power to serve and protect and to rule with other humans over the animals, but we haven't been authorized to rule over other humans as a slave-master relationship. So it really messed up image of God thinking.
invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever. Reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and convert them to his and their use and profit. Anyone know what I'm reading here? These are the words of Pope Nicholas V in a papal bull, or an official edict of the Catholic Church in 1452. This papal bull, followed by many others from 1452 to 1493, collectively became known as what's called the Doctrine of Discovery. The Doctrine of Discovery is this series of papal bulls that is the church in Europe saying to the nations of Europe, wherever you go, whatever lands you find not ruled by Christian rulers, those people are less than human, and the land's yours for the taking. It was this doctrine of discovery that allowed European nations to colonize Africa and enslave the African people. It was also this doctrine of discovery that let Columbus, who was lost at sea, land on a continent inhabited by millions and claim to have discovered it, because there were no people here. The notion of discovery is a racist colonial concept that assumes the dehumanization of people of color. If you don't believe me, I welcome you to put your car keys and your smartphones out in front of you, and I will come by and discover them for you. Discovery requires the dehumanization of the people who are already there. Otherwise, I would be stealing them.
Thank you once again for joining us on St. Mary's Chester Talks About Race. Until next time, let us together go forward in peace to love and serve the Lord.